I believe the way marketing should look at every aspect or every campaign is what's the customer look like from a 360-degree point of view.
Hello, and welcome to Velocitize Talks. My name is Andy North, and today my guest is Mike Vasavada, founder and director of Mobiddiction. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Mobiddiction is described as the new age consultancy merging strategy, design, and technology. Tell us about your company and what makes it unique in the marketplace.
When we started Mobiddiction, it was about, what can we do which is going to be different and digitally, right? And so we broke the norm and started to create experiences. The iPhone, I remember the 3GS had just launched, which paved the way to a lot of new applications. But eventually we've grown into a digital customer experience sort of technology company in Australia.
Mike, you created a process called AIM for CI. That's a lot of acronyms. What does it mean and how does it work for marketers?
AIM. A stands for analyze, I stands for improve, and M stands for measure. Right. So at every stage in the process, whether you're developing a new product, something to do with technology, something to do with innovation, right? It's always important to circle back on these three. Now you look at analyzing it, and it's a continuous loop. If you really look at it, you've got to build something, or you have to look to build something new. Say, for example, an application you want to develop for your customer base, or a new application. You analyze the market situation. You analyze the trend amongst, the different demographics. You do a lot of research-based documentation and all of that. And UX and UI is all part of this. And then you actually implement the solution, right? And once you implement the solution, I see a lot of companies, they actually focus a lot on the marketing efforts and, acquisitions and all that. But unless you have a process of improving that continuously, you cannot really improve your product all the time or a solution that you've created. So it's analyze, moves on to improving your product, analyzing your product. The last one becomes measuring it, right? We as marketers, we're very wary of all the tools that are around. We do get, lost in the data sets and we forget the core premise that, hey, is our product meant to be delivering end customer experience? Is our product meant to be delivering that objective that we set out to? So you got to go back to that continuous loop of AIM, and CI in this particular process or in this model is for continuous innovation.
In doing research for our discussion, I found that your team was recently involved in what had to be a first of its kind event, literally called the world's first underwater VR-enabled virtual summit. I'm going to repeat that for the audience. The world's first underwater VR-enabled virtual summit. There's so much to unpack there. Tell us about this event and what were your takeaways from it?
Look, it was an amazing experience, and I get comments even today. The event only concluded last month, but I tell you, it was such a wonderful experience because, with COVID restrictions and the inability of people to interact, inability of people to travel and meet for, say, an SLT seminar or a workshop, for example, or just your employee engagement, sort of end of year summits, awards, all of that. And there has been so much digital sort of, growth these days, as we know, during the pandemic. But a lot of people are actually not able to meet. They're not able to, go out to a place and experience what we used to like before. So global brand Genesis, came to us and said, hey, look, we want to create an experience for our annual sort of, the SDR summit where we've got, a couple of hundred global leaders, global SDRs who actually dive in. We want to engage them with, product information, do quizzes, just like you would actually do when you walk into a physical event space, right? And having just a Zoom call or webinar was just not enough for this one. So we went out and we said, look, how about we do this? How would we create something which is unique, something which is never done before or even tried, for example? So we came with the idea of doing a world first underwater conference. And what did that mean? We hired divers, professional scuba divers, went up to the Great Barrier Reef and engaged and a lot of people who actually shot us footage in 360-degree VR mode at the Great Barrier Reef. We packaged all of that together as a boat tour for these people. So people who are attending the summit would come into this VR experience a boat tour, jump into the water, and the conference was set up as a 360 view within the Great Barrier Reef. So you had a speaker pop in, a live DJ session which opened the conference. We had a member of the Anthony Robbins team give us motivation speech. There were fire chats, QA, live chat, everything underwater. And it was a beautiful experience because the Genesis as a company went a mile further. They sent swag to all the global teams, which included a maraca, a beach towel, which is all branded the conference summit, obviously with VR lenses as well. So it was fantastic, and we're still excited. I get goosebumps when I talk about it, Andy.
What an exciting opportunity that must have been. I'd like to switch gears a little bit to working with startups. Startup businesses and their teams have so much to do and think about in the first year of their life, and it's just mind-boggling. You recently gave a presentation called Roadmap for Startups, Key Things to Get Right in the First 6 Months. What are some of those crucial steps to get right for startups so early in their existence?
Eventually, what I've seen is a lot of startups that I work with, they go too quickly into design mode, or they go too quickly into market mode or MVP mode or seek funding, right? So there's all these different nuances about being in a startup. Now, if you actually look at a startup, I go back to the base principles of when we want to set up a business. Say, for example, a shopfront, you have to make sure your structure is right. So one of the things I talk about is get your structure right, your company structure. A lot of information is misleading or too exhaustive, so you don't find the right resources because you've got to go hunting for it. But I'd say get your structure right first. The pillars of strength of your future is going to be the structure. I'm talking about partnership agreements, to your company formations, to global agreements, all of that. Then you've got to get into a situation where you have to be very confident on what your product offering is. So get your vision right, the mission right, and your goal.
Augmented reality and virtual reality are two technologies that have been around a while, but they haven't really caught on with marketers. What's been your experience with AR and VR, and what does the future hold for them from a marketing standpoint?
With things like AR and VR, whilst a lot of companies have been trying to get this into mainstream, I think the issues we've had is twofold. One's the experiences that we were able to create on the devices earlier. And obviously we're getting better, day by day with new devices and new functionality and new, obviously, embedded hardware. Now, that's one way to look at it because the technology is advancing. So we're able to give those experiences out, right? Now, the other part of it is there was not a lot of uptake of technology from not only consumer point of view, but also from an organization point of view. Because organizations invest in technology where they get good bang for buck, right? They want to make sure that technology is being widely used and all of that. So things like AR and VR were stuck to certain niche projects within organizations, right? There was, we've done this cool activation and that was AR based, right? Used by 5 people, 10 people and be done. It's a great case study. But now what's happened is, and I'd say, look, it's a positive way to look at a pandemic, but just the growth of digital we're having.
One of the questions we like to ask our guests is, if there's one thing you could change about marketing, what would it be?
And I believe the way marketing should look at every aspect or every campaign is what's the customer look like from a 360-degree point of view, right? What is my lifetime value of this customer? How do I work with this customer for a longer period of time with more product uptake, and then work as a customer marketing campaign, not just, hey, here's a marketing campaign, I want you to get the product out. So I believe marketing needs to think about marketing 360.
So it's not so much about just getting them in the door, but about keeping them there and building their brand loyalty.
The relationship, those, hey, it's your birthday, all those little nuances that, we used to really do really well. And a lot of companies do it really well even today. But I think a few of the young marketeers are probably focusing too much on digital acquisition, digital skills, and no matter, the marketing, the entire field is changing, evolving. So we have to adapt. But I think having focus on also having an understanding of what is it on the other side is very important.
Another question we like to ask our guests is, what's the best professional advice that you've ever been given or heard?
Going back to many, many years ago where, I have this mentor, back in my home country, and before I was coming here to Australia, 20 plus whatever years ago, it was, he mentioned to me, he said, look, you got to do two things, right? One is OPM, right? And I said, well, what does that mean, right? I said, he said, you need to learn by OPM. I'm like, okay. And he said, it's other people's mistakes, right? And it struck me, and he said, learn from other people's mistakes. And I said, okay, great, that's one. Another thing he said to me, he said, always have a badge on your heart, which says PMA, right? And I was like, okay. So he said, remember the OPM and remember the PMA. The PMA was positive mental attitude, right? And those two things, and I was probably 20 plus years at that time, and I was looking at the horizon, not understanding any of that. And I thought, right, buzzwords, let me go. But as I've grown into this space and I've actually matured enough, and I look at it and go, wow, so damn powerful. Learn from other people's mistakes.
And lastly, is there a book, a blog, or a podcast that you'd like to recommend to our viewers?
I'm reading an interesting book these days. It's an old book, actually. I'm reading a book called Ninja Innovation by Gary Shapiro. So recommend that. It talks about a lot of concepts of, how do you actually innovate and how to be a ninja warrior at that, right? And you've got to have those ninja principles to innovate. Things like, status quo is for the normal, right? And status quo is not going to be here forever. So how do you actually combat these using ninja strategies? So Ninja Warrior by Gary Shapiro, I think that comes to my mind.
Mike, this has been wonderful. Our guest today has been Mike Vasavada, founder and director of Mobiddiction. Mike, thanks again so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Andy. Thanks for having me. All the best.